Hi, it's Willow here, and I am here today to talk about a subject that I know will potentially catch me some flack. But what can anyone talk about these days that won't potentially catch them some flack? So, eh. The topic of this video is the mansplain. And the mansplain is the bane of many a woman's existence. It's something that is somewhat insidious in our male female dynamics. It's a form of subtle misogyny that needs to be outed. One of many forms of subtle misogyny I will put out there that needs to be outed. It's a power dynamic that needs to be outed. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the mansplain and how elements of gaslighting are often woven into the mansplain. And I'm also going to talk about a couple of the techniques that either mansplainers or gaslighters, or the combination, the gasplainers, can use in their tactics, okay, in their emotional, psychological, intellectual warfare. So we're in a time when there's a lot of embedded power bullshit, power related bullshit going on, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of kind of fine tooth combing to pull these dynamics out and to make them more conscious, right? To make people more aware of them. And so that's the point of this video. I'm not trying to demonize men. I don't hate men. I know that not all men mansplain, okay? And even the men who are mansplaining probably aren't, completely conscious of the fact that they're doing that, okay? I get that. But I'm just saying, this is something that we need to be aware of. This is something that has happened to me multiple times. I don't think you will find a woman out there who has any awareness of these dynamics who has not been mansplained. It's a common thing, right? It even has a word for it, mansplaining. Okay, so what is mansplaining? That would be maybe the first thing to get off the docket. So mansplaining is when a male sort of automatically takes a position of intellectual superiority over a female and explains something to her in a way that sort of kind of attempts to negate her stance or her perspective or her experience or what she's just said. Okay, so there's a few different forms that can happen. So it's not always that in particular. The kind of the most basic mansplain is just a man explaining something that a woman is already well aware of. But it's like he automatically assumes that, again, he's the intellectual superior. He's much more knowledgeable about things, and that he has to sort of kind of condescendingly and head-pattingly explain something to a woman. And this is just something, again, that a man, because we live in a patriarchal society, friends, and again, men, whether you want to admit it or not, if you look at our institutions, at the highest levels, the pyramid caps of all of our pyramid schemes of power, they are dominated by men, okay? So the male perspective and the male ways of doing things certainly permeate our society. Now, does the violent fascist patriarchy and pyramid schemes of power, do they hurt men too? Yeah, obviously. They hurt everyone on the gender binary, or the non-binary genders. They hurt everyone. They hurt everyone, no matter what your gender is, right? So don't get me wrong. I'm fighting the man, right, and the woman for everyone, right? So is really ultimately what I feel I'm doing, right? But we do have to break down these kind of male-female dynamics if we want to change anything, okay? And so, so the mansplain, again, can be just explaining something that's like fairly elementary to a woman, like, oh gee, thanks for explaining that to me. I haven't known that for the past 10 years, 20 years. That isn't something that I'm already, that's not my field of expertise. So yeah, you need to get in on that. But the other thing that they can do is they will explain something, again, like I said, to kind of undermine the woman's position on something, or undermine the stance on something, to try to get the woman to realize, how silly and foolish she's actually been. And the mansplain almost always, well, I would say probably always, is unrequested, okay? Unsolicited, unrequested, undesired, okay? So that's another element of this power dynamic, where the man is kind of like foisting his generous wisdom on the woman in a way that is not necessary, is not wanted. It's also a way of, again, just kind of taking the intellectual upper hand, like putting yourself in the kind of intellectually superior position automatically, just because that's what men are sort of naturally taught to do in a lot of respects, right? So one of the techniques that is often used in mansplaining, and that actually also is used in gaslighting, is the Socratic method, okay? And so the Socratic method, it's based on the philosopher Socrates, obviously. And the Socratic method is basically asking a person questions, pointed questions, and often incredibly condescending questions, again, to kind of get the person to come around to that male perspective, or that male understanding of things. It's questions being asked to try to get someone to understand the error of their ways. And this is actually, I've actually had a New Age male use this technique, this Socratic method technique, and literally say that he was trying to, he was trying to exercise patience. The lesson for him was how to exercise patience as he, painstakingly attempted to show me the error of my ways, the error of my perspective. So it's this kind of jazz with these people, these men. But so the Socratic method, I've often noticed this, is that it's used really like condescendingly, and in a way where the person using the method is automatically taking the kind of intellectually superior position, even when unearned. Let's just put it that way. I will go on the record also as saying that I don't do philosophy, because philosophy is male dominated. I mean, let's face it, right? All the people who rose to prominence as philosophers, all the people who made the philosophy books, are males, right? So it's a completely skewed profession. Ultimately, I don't think I need a person to teach me how to think, or to teach me what to think. I'm an autodidact, and I think that free thinkers, you can be exposed to the ideas of the philosophers, but I think that you can come into your own philosophy and your own understanding of things and your own truth just by being a smart person and by learning and growing and right? But that's maybe a more female stance on philosophy, right? Because the kind of crystallized male figures of philosophy are, often lauded and put on pedestals and considered, the great thinkers of the times. And, I just don't know about that. And I don't know how useful it is to pattern ourselves after, these philosophers who, again, have been mostly males. Okay, so the element of gaslighting that comes into mansplaining, and I just kind of realized that there is an element of gaslighting to it as well, is that basically, again, you're kind of, and I'm not saying that all mansplainers, are consciously doing this, but this is kind of a technique that's used often, is to kind of undermine the woman's position, undermine the woman's intellectual authority, right? Undermine her perspective, her words, her experience, okay? And that's a common form of that's the underlying reason for gaslighting, the method for gaslighting, right? And gaslighting is a form of emotional and psychological warfare where you're basically trying to poke holes in someone else's truth or perspective. Okay, that's what gaslighting ultimately is you're getting the person to doubt themselves, to doubt their experiences, to doubt their feelings, their thoughts. So if you come into contact with a gaslighter and you're kind of talking about something that has happened to you or something that you've experienced, something that you've observed, the gaslighter will again turn it back on you and sort of try to poke holes in what you're saying or what you're feeling, right? So there's kind of this sense of, oh, well, you just misunderstood that. That's not what I meant when I said that. That's not what I meant when I did that. That's just a misperception on your part. That's a huge one with the New Agers, right? The negative or the, what is it? I can't remember, but anyway, it's something related to how your perceptions are just off. You're just not understanding things the way that they are. So gaslighter will just turn everything around and be like, oh, well, that either that's not what I said, that's not what I did, or, oh, you misunderstood what I said or did. I didn't mean it that way. You took it the wrong way. You're overreacting. That's not what happened. That's not what really happened. Let me tell you what really happened. So gaslighting is a form of emotional and psychological warfare where you're sort of trying to throw the person off balance, trying to get them to doubt themselves, doubt their own reality, their own headspace, what's going on in their lives. And it's very insidious and it's very toxic, gaslighting is. Often narcissistic personalities use gaslighting to try to sort of maintain the upper hand in relationships, in interpersonal dynamics, try to maintain control, and to kind of undermine the other person's confidence and undermine the other person's, again, just sense of reality, sense of what's going on. So you can see how mansplaining and gaslighting can kind of be merged at times, right? And there can kind of be an element of gaslighting, so an element of this kind of warfare in the mansplain. Because as they're mansplaining you, they're trying to basically poke holes in, your stance and your perspective and your experience. And again, I've had this happen to me so many times. Any woman with a strong perspective is going to run into this, right? Because society ultimately can't handle women with strong perspectives. They will often take a woman who has a strong voice as an affront, as a threat, as something that's unnatural, right? Because women are supposed to be sweet and kind and submissive, and they're just supposed to support everyone else around them. They're not supposed to kind of take the lead themselves. And so if you do talk about subjects that are in any way controversial, and again, in today's society, what subject is not controversial? What subject is not considered controversial at this point? You're going to come into contact with these people. You're going to come into contact with people who are trying to poke holes in you. And one particular form of this that I come into contact with a lot, like all the time, to the point where now I just I can pick it out immediately, is the nitpicker. Okay, so what the nitpicker does, and this can have elements of mansplaining, it can have elements of gaslighting. It has elements of, ultimately it's trying to poke holes in you, right? So the nitpicker is trying to look for a weak spot, any weak spot. And it's going to pick on basically the weakest element of your argument, or if you're doing a video or if you've done an article, you'll do this huge long article and there will be one small little, it doesn't even have to be an error. It could just be an area where there's a little bit of an in for them, right? And they just latch onto that like crazy, just totally insane. They've just completely negated the whole article that you've done, but they're just picking on every little angle they possibly can. And, this goes on all the time too, because, and sure, like I get it. You don't want people having a big ego. You don't want people getting, a big head about what they do. You don't want people feeling like they're celebrities. I get that. But at the same time, just because a woman has a strong perspective and is willing to tell it like it is, that doesn't mean that she has a huge overblown ego. Okay, that's another thing that I think men don't come into contact with anywhere near as much as women do, is again, being called like a narcissist or an egomaniac just because you have a strong perspective, just because you know who you are in the world and what you're there to say and what you're there to do. I don't think that men have this same. I doubt that most male astrologers or writers have the level of vitriol that I've had to deal with in my comments section, in my emails, in my, in the comments on my YouTube videos and the Twitter. Like, it's mind-boggling, the smallest little element that they will latch onto, right? These nitpickers that just kind of try to get under your skin. Okay, so we got mansplaining, we got gaslighting, we've got the nitpicker, trying to find the weak spot. And the reason I'm doing this little video on this topic is that I got mansplained yesterday, and it had elements of all of this kind of stuff going on. And again, it was just kind of like mind-boggling that, like, why are people even bothering? Like, why is this much energy going into this? I don't understand. But I had done some tweets on a Joan Jett documentary that I saw on, it was supposedly on the, the punk scene, the punk music scene and punk ethic, starting in the 1970s. What the documentary should have been called, basically, in my opinion only, was how punk ethic and punk rock was co-opted by the corporate music bloodsuckers. That's ultimately what I think it should have been called. I had to walk out before the documentary was over because I realized that it was, even the documentary was a construct and was basically, being used as controlled opposition. Like, oh, yay, look at this, like, strong punk woman that we've allowed to rise to the top, like one strong punk woman that we've allowed to rise to the top in 30, 40 years. So yeah, I wouldn't get too celebratory there. I recently saw a list of, I think it was the top 100 guitar players of all times. There was one woman on the list out of 100, and it was Joan Jett. So yeah, Joan Jett's kind of become like the poster child for, like, I don't know, punk female empowerment. And I'm not saying Joan Jett is not a real punk, is not an amazingly talented artist and performer and musician. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying that Joan Jett is being used. Joan Jett's being co-opted. Her energy and talent and raw skill and all that type of stuff is being folded into a larger agenda. And that's ultimately what all famous punks, I think, are being used for. I don't think there is such a thing really as a famous punk. I think if you're a famous punk, you're like more of a pop music star. Because I don't think anarchists and punks really get famous. Because if you have the real deal, the real goods, and you're doing the real work, yeah, you're just not going to get there. The thing is that, you have to play a certain game to get there, and you have to, you have to be a mouthpiece for the pet agendas of the establishment as well. There are certain agendas that are allowable in the corporate music scene and in the, the general, so mainstream media. And so transgender, that's one of them. And what would be another one? Animal rights, right? They don't focus on human rights. They don't focus on the fact that human beings are being treated worse than animals in most cases, but animal rights is a big one that's allowable. Climate change, right? So there's certain pet issues that they will allow to have a platform, but they will not allow any of the, any of the hundreds, thousands of other issues that desperately need to be put on the map. they won't allow those to surface. So the Joan Jett documentary, one of the things that I picked up on was the language in it, and what I believe is planted language or programmed language, which is constantly referring to grown women as girls. Okay. And yeah, this is just a small thing. This is just a small criticism of my broader criticism of the whole co-opted punk scene. Like, don't get me wrong. But one thing I picked up on was that they're always calling women girls. Okay. Like, oh, they don't take me seriously because I'm a girl in music. Oh, they didn't take me seriously because I was a girl. And oh, girls can play rock music too. Girls can do this and that too. You know what I mean? Joan Jett's like a 50-something woman. She's far from a girl. Even they rolled Miley Cyrus out. Miley Cyrus is considered a punk these days. Like, that's surprising to me. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. But even she's not a girl. I mean, you leave your girldom behind by the time you're 21, maybe 18, even in some people's minds. So to me, it's like, why is this hitting the like edgy punk discourse? Why is it so considered so empowering and edgy to call women girls all the time? Okay. And so I do think that it's an element of diminishing language that's being implanted, because words have power, words have energy, words have, words are more than just words. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Words can kind of shape things. And I think when I'm seeing all of these women in their like 40s and 50s referring to women as girls all the time, it's that kind of girl power, like Spice Girls kind of thing. I don't know, regurgitating through the punk movement, the pseudo punk movement, I would say. It's just something I'm a little leery of, right? Anyway, so this was something that I brought up on Twitter. And of course, I got a nitpicker, mansplainer kind of guy using the Socratic method. So it kind of, wove together a few of these things. And so I'm not going to go into it too much because it's not really that big of a deal. But basically his discourse involved, again, asking me these pointed questions that was trying to get me to realize the error of my ways and realize that, this wasn't programmed language and there wasn't anything beyond, there wasn't anything more nefarious about it. It was just kind of a natural, element of language, right? And I'm just also going to put on the record that another thing that irritated me about this documentary is, so Joan was coming together with, I can't even remember who they were because I don't really pay too much attention to music, I'm not gonna lie, to these two kind of like older corporate music dudes. I don't know who they were. And one of them booped her on the nose, like, boop, oh, aren't you adorable, boop, And again, I'm like, this is a 50-something, like, hardcore punk woman who has taken so much shit and abuse and has, like, somehow survived through it all, and you are booping her on the nose? Like, no. We'll not go there. We'll not enjoy that. So anyway, this guy's discourse, right? This Socratic method, mansplaining, kind of went along these lines. So, he said, so is it considered diminishing to call young girls girls? So I said, no, not if they're a literal girl, if they're grown women. Oh, well, aren't you harming young girls by saying that by saying the word girls is diminishing? Because they can't help being girls. Okay, again, I'm not saying the word girl is diminishing. I'm saying using it in constantly as part of a kind of public discourse, using it to refer to grown women is an element of diminishing language. Yeah. What about when older women call each other girls? Like, I'm going out for lunch with the girls. Again, not talking about conversational uses of the word girls. I'm talking about this kind of ingrained in the public discourse. This is a film that they're putting out. Okay, this is a popular film that hundreds of thousands or maybe like 1 million people are going to see. using this language. Okay, so that's different from like Betty and June heading out to, have some mimosas at lunch. Oh, well, what about when you were playing Golden Girls Monopoly? Did you find that diminishing, or did you realize it was just a game? Because my sister's a really big Golden Girls fan, and I had posted a photo of the fact that she kicked our butts severely in Golden Girls Monopoly. It was like a nosebleed of hotels. Like, that's what she had going on. Anyway, so like, it's just, I don't know. Maybe some people out there are like, hey, he's got some good points. But, for me, it's like, this is just so ridiculous that it's a waste of my time and energy to even continue with it. It's like, obviously I'm not talking about like those particular instances. I thought I made that very clear in my tweets. And I would say to most people who aren't nitpicking, mansplaining gaslighters, it probably was pretty clear. But anyway, so that's just like one tiny example in a 15-year career of having these kinds of interactions with people. So I guess the thing that I would put out there, though, and of course gaslighting can happen to males and females. Again, people along the whole gender the whole gender spectrum. I just use male and female language, so it's you're just gonna have to roll with it, okay? Because not everybody's I love people of any gender, whatever gender binary you're on, whatever gender spectrum you're on. If you're a cool, good-hearted, respectful, nice person, and that's who you are to me, then I don't care. I don't care about it. Like, it doesn't. I don't mean I don't care about it. It doesn't. There's no glitch. There's no problems, right? And so I think that, like, for most people, it's probably we're at that stage. There's still people that are, anyway, I don't want to get this into like the whole transgender debate, because I don't really think there's a debate. I think that that's pretty much a divisive thing that's been like, a stake tossed into a pit of alligators on the public scene. I'm not saying that there isn't huge work to be done on rights and protecting people who are of different on the gender spectrum, where they may be attacked or otherwise harmed. I get that. I totally get that. But I think this like constant like obsession over it, and yeah, maybe that sounds hypocritical to some people because I'm bringing up this girl thing, but again, this is just one element of my broader criticism of the whole, what I would say as corporate punk scene, right? And the fact that, again, there's a list of 100 greatest guitar players of all times, and only one female on that. And that's not because there aren't great female guitar players. That's because only certain guitar players have been, well, for one thing, women haven't really been encouraged to go into music and develop to go into music. When they do go into music, they face like criticism and mockery and even full out attacks, being physically attacked, the threat of rape, there's all kinds of horrific stuff going on when women go into music. And so, like I say, I'm not saying that Joan Jett doesn't deserve her props. What I'm saying is that, unfortunately, she's being used by an agenda that does not really have punk ethic, does not really have like the people's best interests at heart. Okay, so yeah, so obviously gaslighting can happen to anyone, right? And gaslighting is something we need to be kind of aware of, especially with the ramping up of narcissistic tendencies in our society that are almost to the point of becoming acceptable, like socially acceptable. Gaslighting is something everyone should be aware of. So again, it's that undermining, right? Undermining of you, making you doubt yourself, making you doubt your reality, making you doubt that that's, trying to convince you that that didn't really happen, or I didn't really say that, or I didn't mean that, or, you're crazy, basically. Your reaction's crazy. I don't know why you're reacting like this. I didn't do anything, or, that kind of subterfuge that's going on. But the mansplain is a dominant male-female dynamic, okay? And it's something that we need to shift. We need to shift this natural sense that, like, the man is just going to be the intellectual authority, and it happens in a million different insidious ways, right? Where men are given that, they're afforded that intellectual superiority, or people will just defer to a man as an authority figure. The vast majority of professional practicing astrologers are women, but almost all the big name astrologers, considered big name, are men, right? So right there, just like there's 100 greatest guitar players of all time, and there's one woman on that list, that shows you that basically the system is set up in a way that men are going to be supported, encouraged, promoted. They're going to rise through the ranks, right? And they're going to have the opportunities to better themselves and to get their work out into the public in, broader ways. And women aren't going to have those opportunities. And because there is this kind of sense that women are this supportive force, right? And they're supposed to just kind of, put their energy into propping up other people or supporting other people, encouraging other people, rather than going out there and doing it themselves. We run into these dynamics where the men kind of rise to the top, and people are good with that. People support that. They support the men rising to the top. But anytime a woman kind of comes out as a leader or with a strong perspective, she's going to have a huge amount of flack. She's going to have an uphill battle to get, anywhere close, unless she can be used, right? Unless she can be used by the sort of patriarchal structures to show, oh, see, we're inclusive. We bring women on board. But again, it's only going to be certain kinds of women. It's only going to be certain kinds of voices that are allowed into that dominant paradigm. So anyway, again, not stirring up the gender war or the male-female war, because I think that's counterproductive, right? But I'm basically just shedding some light on something that undermines a lot of women, and a lot of women have to kind of, there's a little bit of like recovery time from coming into contact with someone like that, right? It's just like when you come into contact with the gaslighter. When you've been gaslit for like months or years, you've literally been energetically poisoned by that person. You've been emotionally and psychically poisoned by that person. So it takes some recovery time. Even when you get that person out of your life, even when you're able to pinpoint that dynamic and get that dynamic cleared out of your life, there's recovery time from dealing with that for so long. Okay, so these are some of the hits that people take, right? That are hidden, that aren't visible, right? And these hits they add up over time, and they can really do a lot of damage to people. They could draw people into depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking. They can, break down relationships. They can break down careers. They can, make it so that people don't believe in themselves enough to really go for it, and to really achieve everything they're able to achieve. So this is just some of the subterfuge that is keeping people down. And again, that doesn't just happen with women, but in particular, in the current patriarchal structures, women are dealing with a huge amount of subterfuge, a huge amount of emotional recovery work that's going on, because they're being, emotionally shredded or energetically shredded. Their confidence is being shredded in kind of like, death by 1,000 cuts, or like Chinese water torture, like just little by little by little by little, it just kind of adds up and adds up and adds up, right? So this is all stuff that we need to be aware of, and this is all stuff that we need to get rid of. Fuck it, it's over, let's just get rid of it, because I'm sorry, but mansplainers, you're better than that too, okay? You don't need to head pat anybody to try to exert your authority and exert your status. I get that that's something that's kind of gonna freak people out who are used to being in those positions of authority. We're heading into the Aquarian era. We're in the Aquarian era, really, astrological Aquarian era, which is a much more egalitarian era than the Piscean era was. And so people who are used to positions of institutional authority or just societal authority, like, again, rising to these positions of power and authority and status, where they're looked to as, the leader or the intellectual authority in any given case. As these things start to kind of shift and things become more egalitarian, we are going to see people kind of like fighting for their old status, fighting for their old position, and fighting to maintain these kind of same old dynamics. But ultimately, that's not going to be successful. Okay, that's not going to work. So why don't we just all scrap this crap now? Let's just scrap it, because it's not working for us. It's not good, and really, we're all better than this. Okay, so let's all work to rise above this socially engineered garbage that's holding us all back. Okay, so anyway, that's all I have to say about that, and just understand that I'm not saying this to be an ass. I'm not saying this to try to, as a power move. I'm saying this because this is stuff that we need to expose, okay? We need to expose this emotional and psychological subtext. The cosmic spotlight Jupiter is on the 29th degree of Scorpio right now, which is all about shining that light on all of this, emotional, intellectual, energetic subtext, and all of these techniques of warfare, and all of these power moves, and all these power techniques. It's all got to come up, it's all got to come up to the surface, so that we can choose something better. Because really, we all deserve something better. And I definitely deserve something better than that mansplain that I got about the girl language. Okay. So anyway, peace out.